Skinwalkers are not something to play around with. They're known to be powerful Navajo witches that can turn themselves into almost any animal. These witches are said to inherit all of the abilities that come with transforming into the animal of their choice. They can have the strength of a bear, the speed of a wolf, and the eyes of a hawk. It's said that there may be no limit to what these witches can turn into. The Navajo, Utes, and Hopi all have small variations of what skinwalkers are, but more or less, they're all just about the same type of evil, and they are deeply believed to exist. They aren't just a boogeyman type of story being told to scare children. These skinwalkers, these Navajo, Ute, and Hopi witches have been reported as being seen not only by the natives, but from non-believers as well. People have called in reports of hearing skinwalkers outside of their homes. They growl, they howl, and they bark, but it doesn't sound like an animal. They've been said to run alongside moving cars, and they keep pace with them. You know, the car, they'll speed up in an attempt to get away from this creature that's following the car, and it will stay alongside the car, even as it's accelerating. The only reason it stops is because it seems like it gets bored, and it just runs off back into the woods. But it may come as a surprise to you that a lot of the stories about skinwalkers do not end with them attacking or mutilating people. They tend to not actually make murder part of their day-to-day lives, and anything you've probably heard on TV or in the media in general is just over-dramatized to get your attention. And I can't say this is enough. They are not werewolves at all. In fact, you may be upset with hearing this, but they have a lot more in common with the wolves of Twilight than, you know, the European werewolf. Remember, these witches are still people. They're not like ravenmockers. Ravenmockers kill so that way they can prolong their life, but that's not the case when it comes to skinwalkers. I actually have a full video all about ravenmockers on my channel. I'll link it at the end. But because skinwalkers are just normal people with a unique knowledge of practical medicine and spiritual medicine, they do kill, but only with specific intent. They don't lose control and go on a rampage at all. However, witchcraft itself is an important aspect in the Navajo world. It's something that their day-to-day lifestyle is patterned to specifically avoid and prevent, and if it ever comes to it, expel it. So while those who practice a skinwalker lifestyle are not necessarily considered to be model citizens, they are not necessarily an absolute evil by any means. Essentially, they're doing things considered to be wrong, but they're not inherently evil. And also, this video wouldn't be complete without an acknowledgement of the series Skinwalker Ranch. And sadly, there are no skinwalkers in the series. If you really want to learn more about skinwalkers, you're gonna have to do a lot of reading. When I watched the first few seasons, I kind of thought them to be, you know, spirits or almost like demons that were haunting and cursing people, but that's not the case at all. But anyway, as far as Navajo, Hopi, and Ute tribe folklore of the skinwalkers, it basically has no information on them and teaches you next to nothing about what they are, but still an entertaining series nonetheless. And lastly, before I get into the skinwalker story, they are not Wendigos. They are completely separate and not in any way the same beings or spirits or what have you. And lastly, real quick, it's said to be extremely taboo and extremely bad luck to even talk about these things. So do me a favor and fight that bad luck with a like on the video. During an unknown time period, a girl had decided to go for a 3-day stay with her best friend, Karen. We don't know the name of the girl, so we're just gonna call her Lily. So Lily's best friend, Karen, was staying with her grandmother on a Native American reservation. It was near a place called Tuba City, Arizona. They didn't really have a lot around them other than other rural homes. The first day that Lily was staying with Karen and her grandmother, nothing strange happened. Nothing was going on. It was fairly a normal stay, except for a stray dog seemed to come out of nowhere. And it was just hanging around the house. It didn't seem like it wanted to leave. This dog was large, black, shaggy, and it seemed to scare the other strays in the area. Usually the strays on the reservation were around other dogs, but this one was consistently avoided by all the rest. So they just decided to ignore it because while they did think that it was strange that it wouldn't leave their house, it essentially was just a large dog that wasn't acting aggressive or anything out of the ordinary, so they just ignored it. Later that night, they started to watch a movie in the living room. And this living room had a very large window right next to the TV that had the bookshelf with the movies right next to it as well. And since it was dark, they didn't bother to close the curtains. So they watched their movie, they were having a good time, and Karen gets up to put up the DVD. And as she gets to the bookshelf, she starts to breathe heavy. and her eyes were locked onto something outside. Her grandmother came up and saw that it was the large stray dog, sitting on top of a wooden box, staring into the living room. So Karen snaps out of it, and she opens the front door and screams at the dog to get off the box and get out of here. And it was as though the dog understood her. It jumped off the large box and ran off behind some shed. The next day, they went to Tuba City and got some groceries, and when they returned, the dog was nowhere to be found. So the grandma went off to visit a few friends while Karen and Lily were left at home. And at around 5 o'clock, the sun was beginning its descent, and the two girls started hearing something trying to open the door. They looked out the front window, and they didn't see any cars, and they didn't hear any cars. But then they peeked around to see what was at the front door, and it was the large stray dog with both of its paws trying to open the door. You see, Lily wasn't familiar with the legends of the Navajo, but Karen, who was, started to panic. She eventually opened the door and screamed at the dog and told it to get out of here and chased it off. Then after her grandmother had gotten back, she was really upset about what she had heard. But with all that being behind them, they got ready for bed. They put on their pajamas, they turned out the lights, and then they began hearing the pitter-patter of footsteps, the sound of panting, and an odd scratching sound on top of the roof. So Lily and Karen jumped out of bed and went to the window, and they started to hear a lot of dogs barking, but they couldn't see what the dogs were barking at. And then they realized there was one dog that was continuously running around their house, barking over and over and over. And it was making a barking noise, but it didn't sound like an actual dog was barking. It began to sound as though a grown man with a deep, low voice was imitating a dog, going rough and arf. So as they were looking outside, the dog jumps up onto the window and looks inside of their bedroom. And Lily had seen 2 black holes right on the dog's throat. And within these 2 holes were 2 beady black eyes staring back at her. All of this happened so fast, but as the girls began to scream, their grandmother came in, she shut the curtains, and she runs and grabs ashes from the fireplace. She loads 3 shells into her shotgun and blesses herself and the weapon. She goes out and takes aim at the creature and tells her in Navajo to get out and that he does not belong here. And then the dog ran off and it wasn't seen again. The next day they called for a medicine man to come over and put cedar in, and he would pray over everyone with cedar smoke and an eagle feather. He blessed the grandmother, Lily, and Karen and told them to eat something bitter. I think it was called an eagle's goal. And after all was said and done, the medicine man told them that this dog was not actually a dog, but a skinwalker. He said it was attempting to harm them by using a type of bone straw, and it would shoot out bone shards. See, ordinary doctors, they wouldn't have noticed this, but the medicine man pulled out a large piece of human skull from the grandmother's shoulder. It wasn't a trick or an illusion, because Karen and Lily both watched him pull this shard out of her shoulder. It was real. It is said the only way to kill a skinwalker is by using magic to fight them, or by dipping a bullet in white ash. Even while they are in human form, actually taking down a skinwalker isn't as simple as though it were a normal person. These witches are indeed human, but don't have all of the same weaknesses that we do. If you ever encounter one of these creatures, I'd suggest treating them as though they are not there and quietly leaving the area. Or maybe try bonding over this video that YouTube says you're gonna love. Or talk about the Raven Mockers of Cherokee Nation and their similarities and differences. Either way, check them out here, and I'll see you there.